So I think the UK housing market has just shifted. Now, whether this is good or bad news will depend on your stance on the UK housing market, but I think it's definitely worth talking about, as it's the first time I've seen this since the market started to turn around about 18 months ago. So there's three things I want to talk about in this video. I want to talk about what has happened, what is potentially happening at the moment, and then what this potentially means for what is coming for the rest of this year and into 2025. So ever since the market topped in summer 2022 or early autumn 2022, house prices have been falling, and the majority of house price indices in this country have picked up small falls in nominal house prices. Now, my personal experience of the areas I'm tracking, I'm seeing much bigger nominal falls than what is being reported, but we're also seeing substantial real falls, i.e. inflation adjusted falls. And I think at the moment, there is the potential to get discounts as big as 20% versus where peak prices were back in 2022. And over the past 18 months, the Bank of England hiked rates. We've seen inflation start to come down. I'm not saying inflation is defeated. I'm going to come back to it later in this video, but inflation has started to come down. We've seen a little bit of confidence start to return to the market as interest rates, or not the Bank of England interest rates, but mortgage interest rates have started to come down a bit as well. So as we've come in to the current period, the start of 2024, what I'm observing is a clear shift in behavior from both buyers and sellers versus what we were seeing last year. So as we come towards the end of 2023, things are actually starting to look kind of quite positive, especially for those that were looking to pick up a discount, as sellers were starting to get a bit more realistic with their pricing, and there were discounts available. You know, like I said in my video last week, I had an offer accepted on a property over 20% off the original asking price. So there were starting to be value propositions appear in the market versus what we've been used to in 2022. Now, as we've come into 2024, what I'm seeing is, because we had a very clear period towards the end, the last couple of weeks of 2023 and the first 2 to 3 weeks of 2024, where there was very, very positive news in the media. The news articles were covering that inflation was basically defeated, which it isn't, that mortgage interest rates were coming down, and there was a big mortgage war, which has since gone into reverse, but that's getting very little coverage. And because of that, people started to think that this is all over, and there's a lot of pent-up demand from last year. There's a lot of both buyers and sellers that decided not to act in 2023. So as soon as you get to January, it's only natural that people are starting to look to move forward, and that was the same for us. We only viewed one property last year, and this year so far, I think we viewed 3 different properties and offered on one. So if I'm a reflection of your average person, which I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, last year I didn't do a thing, and this year I started to look because I felt like there was value starting to appear in the market. And what this has led to is an increase in activity. It's led to an increase in buyer demand and an increase in listings as well, so sellers coming to the market. Now, what's worrying me is what I'm observing in my local region, and also anecdotal evidence from speaking to other people around the country who are seeing the same thing. This is the bit that is concerning me. So I expected to see an uptick in activity, but what I didn't expect is, I've talked about how I don't really trust the house price indices like Halifax, Nationwide, etc. So what my most accurate way of measuring what's happening in my local market is to track the properties that I'm interested in. So I have a short list of properties that I've been tracking for, well, since they basically come on the market. So some have been on the market for a year, some have been on the market for a couple of weeks. And I track those properties, and I track the price point, and I see what reductions I have, and I see how long it takes for them to sell. And that's by far the best way to find out what is happening in your local area. You don't have to track every property, because you only need to track the ones you're interested in. If you want to buy a detached house, don't track semis. If you want to buy a flat, don't track houses. Just track the houses at the price point that you're looking at, that have the features you'd be looking for, and in the area that you'd be looking at. And to be honest, you're probably going to be tracking maybe 5 or 10 properties, because there's not a huge selection in most places in the UK. So I've got this short list of properties I've been tracking since last year. And I think there are at least about 8 or 9 properties on there that had been on there for at least up to 9 months, and the majority of which had not reduced their prices either. And they had just been sat there and sat there and sat there. And it looked like the sellers had no real drive to want to sell, as they weren't dropping their prices. And I've been waiting for those properties to come down further. And what I've seen in January, especially the second half of January, is all of a sudden, in the space of about 2 weeks, all of those properties have gone sold subject to contract. I find this is definitely a shift, because this was not happening last year. But obviously that demand from last year, that pent-up demand has gone, right, mortgages are low enough for us to continue now. These are the properties that are on the board. That looks good. I'm going to buy that property. And all of those properties have gone. It's not like one or two of them have gone. All of them have gone, and they've gone quickly within the space of 2 weeks, and that's without additional reductions. Now, have they gone for asking price? We can't know that for sure. They've probably gone for a little bit below, I'd imagine, as they've been on so long, and any buyer with a bit of nous will be using that when they're negotiating. But certainly to see properties that have been on there for up to 9 months all of a sudden go in the space of a couple of weeks of each other, for me, is indicating there is a shift in the market. And I've seen other people report this to me, that in their local area there's been a flood of activity, and all of a sudden properties that hadn't been reduced and been sat on the market have gone. It's like the market has all of a sudden come up to meet the sellers. So obviously, depending on where you sit on the market, whether that is good or bad news, but either way, I just have to share my own experiences with you guys. Now, does that mean the bottom is in? Where do we go from here? Well, I think it's already become clear over the past week or two that the three key things that drove that, which is the pent-up demand from 2023, inflation supposedly being beaten. It was clearly not beaten now. If we've been at 4% for 3 months straight, so inflation is becoming sticky again. It's going to start to become a narrative again. And then you've got the Bank of England talking about interest rates, saying, look, we're still not looking to cut them anytime soon. And the markets are pricing in June as the earliest cut, whereas at the end of last year, people were maybe expecting a cut as early as March, which just hasn't been the case and doesn't look like it's going to be the case. So there's been this front running by the markets of people expecting things are better than they are. And now there's some realism sneaking back in about all of those elements. Now, will that slow things down? I don't know, because the narrative in the media is still very positive, despite the fact that the headline statistics are still very, very bearish. And sometimes when you look at the housing market, reality and the housing market are just two words that just don't go together. And as we're seeing in the latest report from Rightmove today, and as you would expect, as soon as there's any sort of activity pickup or positivity around the housing market, asking prices surge back up. So we have definitely shifted from where we were last year. There's been a shift in the first 6 to 7 weeks of 2024. Now, where we go from here, I'm not sure. We could easily see a year where we see a continued improvement in activity and potentially prices do continue to rebound, or things could easily get a lot worse very, very quickly. We've just entered into recession. Officially, we are now in recessions. They'll say it's a technical recession. I mean, what does that even mean? It's like saying, oh, it's not. They're saying it's not a bad recession as people have still got their jobs. Well, if people's GDP, individual GDP, is still going down and people's living standards are still going down, having a job is irrelevant, isn't it? You can't say it's a technical recession. We are in recession. It's like saying house prices are only falling technically. But no, they are genuinely falling. They fall in a decent amount, and the house price indices just don't fully reflect what's happened in the housing market. So where do we go from here? I'm honestly not sure, but I just wanted to share what I'm observing. My gut feel is we see this increase in activity through to spring. So maybe April, May time, we're probably going to see a few months of positive HPIs and silly asking prices on Rightmove. And then I think just the reality, which I say doesn't meet the housing market, but I think reality catches up with the housing market, and then the pent-up demand from last year dissipates. People see that inflation is stickier than they expected. People see that interest rates probably aren't going to come down as much as they're expected or as quickly, so they're less reluctant, or they're more reluctant to take on additional debt, especially a big mortgage if they want to buy an overpriced property. And then maybe the end of the year we just go back to this grind, this sideways action. Now, could prices fall a lot further? I think so. I think if the recession gets worse and we start to see job losses, I think job losses is the only thing holding this market together. It's the only way the market has survived. There are so many people hobbling through, but just hobbling through enough. But we are so close. We're in a very, very precarious situation. So that's where I think we are in the market. There has been a shift. I do expect to see positivity over the next few months. But as we go towards the summer and the second half of 2024, I think that is a lot harder to predict. And anyone that's saying that the bottom is definitely in now is just guessing, just as much as anyone that's saying that house prices are definitely going to keep falling from now is guessing, because ultimately we don't know which way it's going to go. And we've seen in the housing market again and again and again over the past 15 years, is rarely does a housing market perform how we would expect it to perform, or how it should perform based on when you look at the fundamentals underneath it. Now, if you want to see my latest thoughts on the housing market, I'll pop a link to my X profile in the pinned top comment. And if you're looking to buy or sell a house at the moment and you want to be aware of some of the Rightmove red flags that you guys need to be aware of, I'm going to pop up that video now and I'll see you guys over there.